the Digital Babble with your host, Flipper. Colorful commentary on your photography. ScenocFingerLakes1.com.
Hey everybody, it's me, Flipper, here on the Digital Babble. This week, every week, 7 p.m. here live on FingerLakes1.tv. You can also go check us out on our website, tdbny.com. And the Digital Babble, it's all about photography. It's all about your photography, my photography, somebody else's photography. And we talk about photography and Photoshop. And the show is geared around you and your questions and anything you want to talk about. But this week we're going to be covering basically camera settings that are manual or M mode and bulb. And we're going to define those and give you some tips and hints on how to use them and when to use them and so on and so forth. So the reason for the getup and the hat is at some point during the show here, I'm going to talk a little bit about doing portraits and some of the things with exposure to give you some better summertime portraits and try to give you some ideas of why shades or a type of filter to shade your photograph or even a hat or some other device such as a diffuser can help enhance your portraits if you're taking shots outside or if you're shooting maybe you have a high school student, you want to shoot your own pictures for the senior portraits. So that's coming right up. So first off, let's get going on manual. When is manual mode needed or necessary? Really, it's up to you as a photographer, but here's what manual does for you. Manual gives you the most creative control over your exposure. It allows you to set every setting on the camera without changing modes. So literally, you're holding the camera. You want to change the aperture, you move this dial. You want to change your shutter, you're going to move a different dial. You want to change your ISO, you're either going to go into the menu or you're going to move another dial. And that's the beauty of manual, is that everything is at your fingertips. Now, the downside to that, which is one of the big problems with manual, is it takes time to set those settings. Now, on most cameras, you got like a gauge on the side of your camera viewport that'll tell you 0, +1, +2, or 0, -1, -2. And it gives you a gauge on how bright or dark the picture in front of you is. And that's how you can gauge your manual settings to see if you're right on to what the camera thinks you should have, or maybe you're a little too dark, a little too bright, or just plain off. So doing all this stuff, and you're doing all the thinking for the camera instead of the camera doing the thinking and calculating, it does take time. So there's always that opportunity that you might end up missing the shot, and that's one of the things that you really want to be aware of when you're shooting in manual, is if you are going to shoot in manual, is that changing your settings are going to take time. Things are going to take time to, move around and then recompose, move around, recompose. And it just could really upset the apple cart here and make you miss your shot if you're trying to take something critical. That's why, like in previous shows, if you have something specific that you're trying to take, use the mode that best suits the scene that you're working with. Now, manual mode can be very productive, can be very good for any photographer of any level, because it allows you to set all those different settings and it allows you to start understanding and experimenting with all those different settings at once. So now you can kind of see how each item interacts with each other. Another thing about manual control that really gives you a heads up, or I guess a heads up, is the fact that little meter really does allow you to kind of look at the scene in front of you and go, okay, that scene over there is just way too bright. So I want to darken it a little bit. So I want to be a -1 or a -2/3 or whatever you want to do. So you get to control those things. Now, some people find this very enjoyable. Other people find it nerve-wracking. I personally enjoy shooting in manual mode when I get a chance, because in manual mode, I do get to work with the things. And it also refreshes my memory about how the camera works, what are my settings, what can I do, so on and so forth. So that's one of the big things with manual mode. When does it become bad? Manual mode is very bad when you're trying to do something very quick. Setting your settings like at a wedding in manual mode, maybe you're going from outside to inside and you're trying to switch real quick. there's always that possibility that on manual mode, you're not going to get all your settings quite right, and you're going to take that shot, and maybe it's not going to be right, and that might have been a critical shot for at a wedding. Maybe you were trying to get a bird flying by, right? Well, if you're trying to get a bird flying by, going by like that, you're just not going to have time to make your adjustments on manual mode. So, that being said, when you're trying to work quickly, manual mode is no good. Another time that it's very difficult to work in manual mode is when you have a subject that is not cooperating. And what I mean by this is the fact that, like saying if you're trying to shoot a kitty cat, okay, very cooperative kitty cat in the sense that it's sitting there and you're trying to take that photo, but in order to get the correct exposure, the cat might move, might swipe at you or whatever the case may be, and it changes the exposure and changes the settings fairly regularly. With that being said, making all those manual changes on your camera, sitting there playing with the camera and continuing to go back and forth on the camera on the manual settings could prove to be very nerve-wracking. A lot of amateurs tend to find manual mode fascinating, but yet intimidating. Nothing to be intimidated about. It's a great thing to play with. There's a lot of neat effects that you can make with manual mode, such as light trails, making waterfalls look like they're painted on, taking and doing long exposures, getting blur, creating things sharper, getting things sharper because you're pushing the camera limit versus the camera telling you what it can do. So those are some definitely different things, good, bad, about manual mode. Now, bulb mode is basically a manual mode. You're going to set your basic settings except for your shutter. When you pull the trigger, you're going to hold the trigger as long as you want to expose whatever you're looking at. So, like a good example of this is like starscapes. Maybe you're going to sit there and pull the trigger for 30 seconds, maybe 30 minutes. If you got the right equipment and the right filters on the front to take in less light, you might be able to hold the shutter for an hour. Now, I would definitely recommend it if you're going to do long exposure with bulb. You want to make sure to get an external button release onto your camera, remote control or whatever. So you press it up here, but you're not touching the camera, because if you're touching the camera, it could move the camera and make it kind of blurry. So that's definitely a good hint, a good piece of equipment to buy as well. So bulb mode is really something very specific, but it's very special because you can get some really interesting shots if you know what you're looking at ahead of time. You take an exposure, you look at it, and you say, okay, I want to make this a little bit brighter. So, like if you're trying to get a high key look, saying you're doing an outdoor portrait. Okay, here's a great example. You're doing an outdoor portrait, and the background's fairly white or fairly light, but you really don't want it to be light. You want it to be pitch white. Well, what you could do is darken up the light coming onto the subject and then work the manual mode or bulb mode, because if it goes past 30 seconds or you're 15 sometimes for some cameras, you might have to go to bulb mode in order to get anything longer than that. And that's where bulb mode really comes in. If your exposure goes outside of your camera's ability to take the photo, like in length and shutter, like 30 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever your limitations are, you can use bulb mode to go way past that and just do whatever you want. And that's where we're like I was saying, a portrait out in the woods type thing. If you can get your subject to stand as perfectly still as possible, shade them with a hat or with whatever you can find that's shadeable, put it over top of them so the light doesn't hit them, but the light's hitting the background. What'll happen is that the camera then has to adjust for their face or, their body, and you're using the bulb mode to say, okay, I want everything in the background to go white. So everything back here is going to go pitch white because it's way overexposed. But then the person comes in somewhat exposed. And then as long as they can sit still and perfectly still as you're taking their picture, as you can tell, I can't do that. I evidently move way too much. So they come in somewhat clear at the right exposure. Great way to do cityscape, kind of like silhouette cityscapes. You could do them at dusk. Like, when you get those really beautiful orange and blue hues right at dusk time, the sun's just going down past the city, the lights in the background, you can actually use a really long exposure to bring up the ambient light and ambient color to get really high contrast look to the sunset in the background, and then the buildings are dark in front. And you might have to go past that 30 seconds. And that's really where it works. After 30 seconds, bulb mode is the only way to go. So let's see. Okay, examples. Examples. Photos and examples. So here we got our camera, of course, the mode dial, the shutter. We've been talking about that for weeks. Let's move on to the mode dial. Right here is the mode dial. It shows you the M and the bulb mode here. Those are your settings on your dial, or if you have a digital dial, it'll do the same thing. You're going to rotate it one way or the other, and it gives you a digital dial. And these two settings are pretty much your manual settings mode. This is where you got everything, every setting at your fingertips. Everything is right there. You're going to modify whatever you want to modify. You're going to do a higher shutter, wider aperture, whatever you want to do. You're in charge. And that's what this whole area of this manual bulb, even this side of the dial really gives you a lot more control as a photographer, as an artist, if you're really looking to get something interesting. So keep that in mind. Manual is a great way to go. So now talking about portrait techniques. Now this is one thing I had a question this last week, and that's why I'm bringing this up, is these portrait techniques. Is the question basically was, I'm taking my daughter out to the woods and I'm going to shoot her climbing through the trees. And one of the things that I'm having a problem with is that I can get her to look okay, but then the doppels of light as they come through the leaves are really messing up my camera's exposure. She'll come in real dark, or the trees will come in real dark, but the leaves will be super bright. How do I fix that? Well, the trees have got the idea. You need to put her in shade so that she's evenly lit, and that's the whole point of shade. If you notice right now, I'm wearing my hat. Okay, let me take the hat off. Okay, so here's me without the hat, without the shades. Hi everybody, how you doing? So you'll notice that the light from outside, my lighting inside the studio here, is coming down, it's hitting my forehead, it's changing how the camera views me. So I'm kind of washed out, or I'm lighter than I probably should be. I also have this really blotchy area right here. I am sweating. What are you going to do? So, what can you do to fix that? Now, there's several things you can do to fix that. Shade. You can take the shade and put it over top of the person, like so, and then kind of adjust what you're looking for exposure. You can use full shade, some shade, rim lighting shade. You can do like a rim lighting type deal where the outline of the head is really lighter than the actual face. You can lighten up the face, but drop the forehead and the hair. There's so much you can do. You can even just put the hat on, and just have a different look to it. As you can see here, if I tilt back far enough, my nose gets real bright, my cheeks get real bright. Whoops, this side. But yet my forehead's real dark, and under the rim of the hat is dark. So that's what we call light modifiers. Now you can do this you can do the shade idea with something opaque, like a hat. You could do it with a diffuser. Now that would be the ideal way. Now a diffuser is like a nylon ripstop, but it's see-through. It's I think 30% opaque is the number we're looking for. But anyway, it's see-through. So instead of being a dark shadow, permanent dark shadow, however you want to do this, like so, and it changes the entire look of your picture, it's actually going to let some light through. So let's see if I can do... I forgot to get me a piece of diffuser, but that's okay. But the idea would be like, instead of being completely shadowy, it might be a lot lighter and evenly lit. And that's the idea behind a diffuser. And using these light modifiers will give you an opportunity to change your picture to whatever you want. Same concept with changing your lenses. Well, as we see in a polarized view, when we put on sunglasses, we change what we see because of the change in lens. You could do the same thing on your camera by changing the type of lens that you have on the front of it. So if you put a polarizer on, if you put a neutral density filter on, you can darken a photo, you can change the composition based on what lightness is being let in, so on and so forth. And you'll see in just a second a couple of these ideas. I don't know, I think I'm going to put the hat back on. This was kind of fun. I got to play incognito. I don't look like Flipper anymore. What's up, man? So anyhow... Okay, I'm done playing. Let's look at a couple different examples right here. On the board, we got a nice waterfall. What happened was that there was doppels of light. You can see where some places were a little lighter, a little darker. And what we did was we took and put on a neutral density filter to let the exposure run long. So this was probably a 4-second exposure, which then painted the waterfall on. Instead of seeing all the individual drops, it looks like it was painted on. You know, the brush came by and there's my waterfalls. Wonderful technique. It's a great look. Some people like it, some people hate it. Yeah, if you hate it, I'm sorry, that's fine. If you love it, that's fine too. It's not my place to judge or tell you what to like or not to like, but I'm going to tell you I like this look. And how to get this look is really a long exposure. Get your camera on a tripod. That way it's stable. Set your exposure to more than 1 second and then shoot away. Now, you might have to use a set of shades like a neutral density filter and darken it up so you can get to 1 second with your current camera. So that's always something to be thinking about putting into your photo bag of tricks, is having a neutral density filter. You can buy just a large neutral density filter. It could be way bigger than your lens opening, and just have it on you or have it in your bag, and you can just hold it up to hold it near the lens. Don't touch the camera, but hold it up near the lens, and that'll cut down on the light as well, and you can get that longer exposure as well. And that's really the key when you're trying to make these blurry objects, such as waterfalls being painted onto a scene. As I have another example here. Let's see. Another one. This one is a little bit shorter of an exposure. It's probably about a half a second, but it was still long enough because the water was rushing so fast. It still kind of looks somewhat painted on, which is okay. I mean, you know, love it or not, you know, it's up to you. But really the whole thing here is that I didn't use a neutral density filter in this picture, but I did use a neutral density in this picture. So there's kind of the difference, and you can almost tell the difference in tones. You can see in the greens and in the water itself, it kind of has more of a darker, I don't want to say darker, but it really has more of a pastel-y kind of look to it. Whereas, you know, the one without the filter, kind of a bit more brighter contrast. There's a lot more contrast to it, so there's a little bit more snap to it, a little more detail. You know, so you don't get that kind of pastel-y, kind of soft look to it. It's really more of a crisp look. So let's see. And then I got a couple of last examples here, which I thought was fun. This was kind of fun. I just did this like 20 minutes ago. I was just kind of playing around. And I said, oh, that's what you can use manual mode for. You can set your exposure really long, and then you take a light, you know, put your camera on a tripod, set your exposure long, take a light, and you can draw in the air. So I said, well, geez, I really love peanut butter, so I'll get the peanut butter jar out. So I got the peanut butter jar out, set the camera up on a tripod, shot a long exposure. I think it was 15 seconds. Now, I had to use a neutral density filter in order to make this work, so I had to darken it up quite a bit in order to get to 15 seconds, especially on a bright day like today, and lights being on in the kitchen. So I turned my camera to it. I fired it away 15 seconds. I took a pen light and turned it on, pulled up, turned it off, pulled on, turned it off, you know, kept making it. So here's the magic peanut butter. Oh my God, it's magic. I got one more example of the magic peanut butter here. So here's more of an up close look at it. This is one really neat technique, and this was all created with just a basic pen light. Something you could buy down to Walmart for 50 cents, or, you know, down at the dollar store for 50 cents. You pop a couple of batteries in, it just provides a little bit of light. You can then do anything you want with it. You could take a wide angle shot of a church, and if you're good at drawing in midair, take some practice. Trust me. I've been trying it for a while now. I'm just not good at drawing. But you could go to like a church, in the front door of the church, and then kind of draw something like an angel, you know, in front of the camera as the camera's taking the picture of the long exposure. And you can draw an angel kind of being on the front porch of the church that you just took a picture of. It's quite interesting. It's an interesting art. It's an interesting concept to try to get a hold of. It's very hard to get your head around it at first, but once you get your head around it, it actually becomes quite fun. You can actually go out, you know, midnight. It don't matter what time. If you got a dark point in time out in your yard, and you got some flowers that you could use as a backdrop, you aim it at the flowers, start your exposure, 30 seconds. If you got 15 seconds, 15 seconds. And then that's what you got to remember. You got 15 seconds, so count it down. Click, okay, draw this, draw that, draw the other. Okay, over here, here's some wheels, here's this, here's that, and boom. Now, as long as you keep moving and get out of the way of the light behind you, the background will be there. You'll be totally invisible to the picture, or mostly invisible to the picture. And all that's left is the light streaks from your pen light. Quite an interesting technique. I really enjoyed it. So, there you go. That's what we got for the photography this week. We got 20 minutes left. We got 2 photos to start editing up. This week in Photoshop, I'm going to actually do some nature edits, kind of go through what I think we should do with some nature edits and so on and so forth. So I'm going to flip it over to, let's pull up the first one. So here's our first victim of a nature shot. Now, it's fairly exposed, pretty good. But, you know, I really don't like how dark it is over this way. I really want to make some more contrast here. Maybe separate those leaves from the rocks. Maybe get a little more contrast. I really do like the painted on look. It looks very nice in this picture. Very calming, very surreal. Up here in this corner, if I had more of the photo, but I cropped it too close. Up top here in the photo, it's very bright. But that's not too bad where we cropped it there. So I think we're okay there. But really, I think what I'm going to do is paint with some light, and I think that's the big thing. We're going to adjust some exposure. I'm going to paint with some light, maybe add a little bit light to under the rock here and under the other set of rocks. Then I'm going to darken a couple of these areas. You know, maybe add some contrast. Just really give it some oomph, you know, for a nature shot. So let me clear our whiteboard here. And we're going to flip over to Photoshop, and here's our picture. And let's start with bringing our photo right up full here, as full as we can get it. And I'm going to start with probably a basic, I think probably levels. And what I'm going to do is I'm looking here, and notice how my peaks and valleys here are really very far to the left, which means the dark areas of the picture are very dominant. And then it fades off to the highlights and so on, all the way over to the right. I think what I want to do is I want to shore this up, make it a little more contrast, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the whites down, so you'll notice the white's getting really bright, and as we move it really far, it really burns out. So I don't really want to burn out the highlights, but I definitely want to make some highlights to make sure that, you know, there is some highlights in this photo. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mid-tone slider and I'm going to move it to the left, brightening the photo as well, and I'm going to get it right about where I want it. I think that's all right there. Maybe a little more. I don't know. Yeah, sure. Right around 26. And then I'm going to make it just a touch more contrasty, not much. Probably 1-2 clicks. That's about it. I mean, I don't want to go too far. I don't want to go too little, but I definitely want to bring it in someplace here. 3 looks good. I like 3. 3 looks really good. I like that. Okay, coming back to my layers, and I'm looking at it, I go, okay, great. Now, what do I want to do next? Okay, well, I'm kind of probably want to do some painting with light. I want to bring out some of the details in some of the different areas, maybe lighten up different areas. Now, you can do this with several tools. One of the tools here, you know, you can use the burn tool or the, let me open it up here. You got the dodge and burn tool. Burn tool, I believe, lightens it, and dodge tool darkens it. So, you know, you could do that manually right on your layer, but that's destructive. And what I mean by destructive is that when you actually use these tools, it's modifying the pixels on the actual photo. So if you ever hit save or you get out of it and come back, or you lose your undos, you know, you could find yourself without a decent picture to start with again. So one of the things that I always like to do is you know, make a copy, and then those are my edits. Or I like to use a different technique. So I'm going to use a different technique. I'm going to actually use a technique which I find very interesting. It's very, very easy. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to set the layer blend mode to a soft light. Now, if I want something darker, I'm going to paint over it with a normal brush. So I'm going to grab a brush, make it the size that best fits my Evidently, I'm not going to be able to change the size of my brush. What happened here? Nope. I can't change the size of my brush all of a sudden. Okay, so we'll do it manually. So we can change the size of our brush up or down. I think we're good here. Whoops. And there we go. Now I can change my size of my brush. Okay, so I'm going to use the left and right brackets to change the size of my brush dynamically as we go. So if we want something a little darker, we can make something a little darker. So we could actually take and paint this falls here and paint some falls here. And notice I'm going to bring in some different details that I want to emphasize instead of what the computer wants to emphasize. So I can literally paint in or paint out different highlights of the waterfalls. And this is going to burn it in. So maybe I'm going to make this nice and dark in here because I want it to just flow and be gone, right? Or maybe not. So maybe I want to bring some stuff back. So now I'm going to change to a white brush. Now this is going to make it all lighter. Now this could really goof things up a lot because black and white on a layer that's based on light, so soft light or hard. Well, let me show you. Overlay, soft light, hard light, vivid light, linear light, pin light, or hard mixed is all based on whatever you're painting. It's going to then project that light up onto the scene and then reflect it. So when we're talking about light, so white or black is the extreme spectrums. So black makes it dark, white will make it brighter. You're going to get some anomalies if you're painting dark things with white light or light things with dark light, depending on what you're doing. So in order to get a no change, we can either delete the edits that I've made so far, or we can come to exactly 50% luminosity, which would be 128. Your RGB would be 128. So right here, 128 or 50% on your HSB scale. It's 0, 0, and 50%. That means it's 50% gray. When you get 50% gray and you start coloring over it, it takes you right back to the original. And now, here's another technique that we can do with painting with light. And just kind of adjust accordingly that we want to do. Now, I could have deleted that, or I can paint on it with gray or whatever. I can also take and shades of gray. So if I want it just a touch lighter, I can then just move it up the grayscale just a little bit and go, okay, well, that's about 15% lighter. And I'm going to paint underneath this rock here. And it's not going to come up too much lighter, I don't think. Let me try a little bit higher lighter. So 15% ain't going to do it. Let's try, 22%. Oh, there we go. And we got a little bit more detail back. Let me do it on something that's really obvious. So here, notice I just drew here. I just made those rocks just a touch lighter. Dark, light. I want to lighten it back up just a little bit. There you go. And that's how you can do it with shades of gray. So, you can go darker and be like, okay, I really want something a little darker here. Okay, fine. Just a little darker, just past gray, just a little darker. Maybe I want this area to be just that touch darker here. So we just darken it up just a little bit. And, I'm going to go right into this area as well. Darken that up. Now you can make these big broad sweeps with the brush and just literally do this kind of painting where you're just kind of changing the majority of the photo by painting with light this way. I'll see the preview. Okay. Yeah. Doing stuff like that, and then maybe take and you lighten up just certain areas that you want to lighten up. Maybe the leaves. Maybe the leaves should be lighter. So we're going to brighten up these leaves just a little bit and just draw a little bit here and try not to get into my other edits. I'm doing this very quickly as usual, so I'm not going to take time to do it really 100% right here. But, you might zoom in a little bit further and go, okay, well, I need to modify just this leaf, and then you're just going to draw that leaf. Okay, and that's really the key here is, taking your time and doing it right. Let's see, what else do I want to do here? So, so we can paint with light this way. We can then, take a dark color and a light color. So there's a somewhat dark color. Here's a somewhat light color. And in the grayscale. And we're going to say, okay, I want to lighten. Well, let's see. I want to darken the waterfall. So darken these guys. And get some contrast back in here. All right. Nice and gently here. Don't overlap too much here into the different areas. Put the water here, and then we're going to basically make a kind of like a light shelf here. And what this light shelf is going to do is lead our eye as we see it. Oh, look, the water's kind of flowing down in there. You can do the same thing here. And your imagination is everything. It makes everything possible. So if you can imagine it, you can do it. So painting with light. So you can, darken up the leaves up here. Maybe you don't like the leaves so bright up here. Or maybe you darken some of the leaves and you change back to a lighter gray and you lighten some of the leaves back up. Yeah, that might be just a touch too much, but you get the drift. So we can go back and forth on this and so on and so forth. Now, maybe some of the other things that I might want to do is maybe I'm going to take and I'm going to do a Control-Alt-Shift-E, which gives me a composite of the layer edits that we just did. And then I'm going to do, well, I'll show you the technique at first. Okay, first I'm going to change this to a soft light. And notice that it compounds the same image over top of itself. So if it's above 50% gray, it's going to be lighter. If it's below 50% gray, it's going to be darker. So in essence, it's increasing the contrast by twofold. Now, what we can use here is we can use a filter called high pass. And what high pass does, and let me cancel that and I'll change it back to normal so we can see what high pass does. So we do high pass. Okay, and what this does is it goes and it looks for the edges of the pixel. So it's like a finding edge type filter, and it's looking for the most contrasted pixels. So if we go really heavy on the radius here, you'll notice that most of the picture comes back in this kind of like ghosty kind of look to it. That's because it can't find all the edges, and it's doing this weird color shifting thing to make that happen. But the lower the pixel radius, now you're only bringing back different pieces of the pixel. So, okay, this is green, this is blue, this is white, this is black. So it's finding those different contrasts. And what this does is it's almost like a sharpen filter. So what we can see is where are the details? Where are the details in this photo? And that's what high pass does for you. So now we made this high pass filter, maybe 4 pixel, radius or whatever. Now, in order to make this sharpen the current photo, we just change it from normal to a soft light, and voila. So I know you're going, voila, I don't see much difference. Let me show you the difference. So we hide the current layer that has the high pass on it, and notice it's kind of, I don't know, misty or maybe not so much in sharp focus. And we do the high pass, and all of a sudden, woof, and it's just like, it's really sharp. I'll turn it off again. You can really see it right here in the leaves and the rocks, right here in the waterfalls where they fall downward. Watch as I turn it back on again. Now we got a nice, sharp, clear photo. So those are some different things that you can do. So painting with light. You can take and do a levels and contrast to try to recover tones or drop tones. You could then use a high pass filter to actually take and sharpen the photo beyond what you might think it needs, or maybe you want it sharp or ultra sharp. You could also use a blur filter. So like one of the techniques we could do, instead of having, let's throw out this high pass filter. Whoops, I did new layer instead of delete. Let me do that again. So let's do that composite again, Control-Alt-Shift-E. So now it gives me a composite on the top layer. And I'm going to filter, and I'm going to do a blur, and I'm just going to do a Gaussian blur. Okay. And just for demonstration purposes, here's with no radius, and then as the radius goes up and up, it just becomes more and more blurry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the Gaussian blur down to around probably 5-ish, maybe 4-ish. 5 sounds good. Okay, notice we got some detail, but mostly everything's real soft. Now, by doing that same technique and we made that a blur, we can actually take and use a soft light and then lower the opacity so it's not so contrasty. And you'll see that it softens it, almost makes it dreamy. You can also do this with a grayscale. You can do the same thing and make this a grayscale. Shifting the blur accordingly. We can take and make the image adjustment here. Adjustment, black and white. And we'll just take, I don't know, maximum white maybe. That'll work. And then lower the opacity again. So you're bringing back the original photo, but at the same time, you're making this kind of dreamy blur thing happening. And then the lighting actually makes that happen accordingly. You could even run this through another high pass filter. So you go filter, other, and high pass, and use the blur layer for your high pass. And you can really get super heavy on this, which is kind of fun. You can get like 40, 30 pixel. And you'll notice like this almost comes out like a cross-processed or even like a old film style where everything's just kind of like this weird kind of misty, ghosty feel to it. So let's save it. We'll call this one done at this point, and we'll save it. Save as a JPEG. Wrong JPEG. Let's try that again. And hit save, and okay. Okay. And we're going to go back to our original. So here's our original on screen. Again, kind of dull waterfalls here, you know, kind of dull all the way around. This is a little too dark. I think some of these things are missing some life, like contrast. So we're going to paint with light, maybe light a little bit of something this up, maybe darken a little bit of this, you know, and just kind of play with the photo, maybe do some sharpening, maybe do some different edits. And then what we did do was we ended up doing a high pass setup. So here's our original. So let me hit escape to get rid of the line. So here's our original. Here's our photo edit. Totally, it kind of does remind me of the, like, they make a filter for cameras. I believe it's a Hollywood Effects thing that says VR mist. And what that did was it desaturated the colors coming in and then blurred it slightly, but still had enough refractive sharpness to the photo that really made the photo look kind of like this. And it was quite a neat effect. And this could be useful in lots of different applications, not just nature. It could be useful in portraits. It could be useful in product catalogs and, you know, all sorts of photography. So there's our first photo edit done. And we got about 10 minutes left, 13 minutes left, so we can do one more probably. So here's another nice waterfall. Again, it was in the examples from earlier. It's a pretty nice waterfall. It's fairly tall. Has the exposure was about a second instead of being several seconds, just 1 second. It kind of started to freeze the water, but the water rushing so fast, it really still has a little bit of that painted on look to it. I think it's really a dull picture because there's not a lot of contrast. Things that should be lighter isn't lighter. Things that are darker aren't really dark. They're just dull. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to lighten up this area up top here. I'm definitely going to do some contrast and brightness contrast to the waterfall itself. I really want to get that water white again. I don't like it gray like this. I'm going to lighten up the whole picture as a whole here. Whoops. My mouse stuck. I'm going to, you know, open up a little area here and try to get some of this. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a vignette effect. And what I mean by a vignette effect is I'm going to make this kind of like fade out kind of thing. So here's the bright area in the middle here. And then as your eye moves away, this is all going to get darker, you know, kind of framing the photo a bit. So let's get to work and make that happen. So what are we going to make this happen with? So flipping over to the other photo. So here's our other photo, bring it up nice and full. Starting with, let's do some levels, and we're going to brightness and contrast. So I'm going to bring the white slider in to get our highlights where we want them. That's pretty close, somewhere around there, 236. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten the whole photo up just to bring things up so white is white again. I want a little bit of that gray in there to give it texture, but I don't want it to be gray. It needs to have some white. So I'm actually going to bring that white slider in just a touch more. Probably not too much more, but just a touch more. And then try to find where I'm happy with the brightness here. So the mid-tone slider, I'm going to move left and right until I find where I'm happy with the photo. And, you know, you can do this at home. Just kind of play with the settings until you get it right where you want it. So like right there, that's nice. That's pretty nice. I like that. Do I need more contrast in the dark side? I don't know. Let's try it. No, it really, as soon as you pull it in, it kind of starts ruining the photo, I think. So let's leave it right at 0. Pardon me for a second, I gotta get a drink. Talking for an hour. So yeah, let's see, where are we? So we got our levels. So we did our levels and now we got the photo looking the way we kind of wanted it. So now what we can do is we can paint with some light. So I'm going to take and make a new layer. Again, I'm going to make it a soft light. I'm going to work in grays. And I'm going to look at the photo. I'm going to say, like, okay, well, what do I really want, darker and lighter? Well, I kind of really want this area over here a little bit darker with the grass. So I'm going to bring in, I'm going to go to 50% gray, and I'm just going to come back like 5%. And then I'm just going to brush over these leaves over here that are a little too bright. Okay. Okay. And then what I do is I come back and I will make it a touch darker, another 5%. And then maybe just do the inside of the grass a little bit, just to darken them up just a little bit. Kind of balancing this photo out a little bit more. Notice now, just with those two edits, let me take away the edit here. So notice the grass is lighter. Doesn't quite match the background. Now it's a little darker. It's starting to blend right into with the background. So maybe that's the effect I'm looking for. So I'm going to make it another 5% darker. So 35%. And maybe I'll do just certain parts of this, the base of this grass. And what this is doing is blending these edits in. So you're not just doing one edit, and you're kind of blending them in and making them subtle. Making it believable, per se. And that's really the key here, is whenever you work on photo edits, you really want them to be believable, not just, hey, look how fancy I got this. I don't know if there's really too much I really want to do here. I don't know if I really want to darken this up here too much, because I think I really want to darken that green area right here that I'm darkening. Maybe go back over it one more pass here. Maybe shrink the brush just a little bit too. Okay, and shrink the brush and just try to hit some of these really light areas that really could blend back in. Now again, I'll turn off the edit up there. You'll notice up here it's kind of washed out, and then we add the darkness, and now it kind of blends in together with the background. Kind of gives it a feel. Okay, so I've got that done. I think I'm going to do one other adjustment to this guy. I'm going to take it, I'm going to make some hue and saturation adjustments. I'm going to overcook this. I'm really going to overcook this. I'm literally going to take this slider, and I'm going to start it at 0. I'm going to pop it up around 30, 35, 40, 40 until I start seeing graininess come. I'm like, okay, well, that's a little too much. 40, 50, 40, 40, 35, 30, 20, 30, 30. 30 is pushing the limit, so I think I'm going to stick with 30. I like it. I might shift the colors just a little bit too. Maybe we want to shift it more to the red and make it look like a fall scene. Maybe it's at sunset. Maybe we shift it the other way and we make it kind of a bluish green scene. Oh wow, they're really flourishing. Or we just leave it at 0. It's up to you. Totally up to you. You are the artist. What you want to do with your photos is totally up to you. I really like the idea that I can look at this and then I can actually take down here on more of the recent Photoshops. You can take, and there's a little eye with a back, like a undo arrow right below your adjustment layers. You can click on it and see what the layer would look like without the adjustment, and then let go of it and it brings the adjustment back. Without. And you just keep playing with the dials until you figure out where you want to be. I can actually kind of like that. That looks good. Okay. How much more? We got about 5 more minutes. Okay, great. Always got to watch the time. My next thing I'm going to do is I'm literally going to do a vignette. Okay, and this is going to be a fun little project, I guess. So we're going to do a new layer, and we're going to grab a gradient tool here, right over here in the toolbar, over on the left, and it's black to white. I'm going to make sure it's radial here. Then I'm going to go from the center, and I'm going to go real big, like way past the corner here, probably by, a good quarter of the photo. And then there's my look right there. Okay, I love it. White to black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 edits. I'm going to turn the opacity down so I can kind of see where everything is. And then I'm going to take and do a darken. And what the darken does is anything above 50% gray is ignored. Anything lower than 50% gray darkens the photo. So now we can take and dial in our exact measurement of vignette. So if you look at the corners, okay, if you're watching the corners, we can take and bring it in just a touch more. You know, we can make it black if we want to make it black. It doesn't look very good, but just make it what you want to make it. If you don't like darken, try multiply. That sometimes is a very nice nice effect. Multiply actually works better than darken a lot of times. And right here is one of those examples. Darken is not a good one, but multiply works fairly well. So how much Vignetti does Flipper want? Probably somewhere around here. Yeah, about 20%. Let's go 20. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So now here we have a nice Photoshop technique for making a vignette. You're going to do a radial blur here on layer 2. So I'm going to do a normal just to show you. So we did a radial blur. Lightness is in the middle. Darkness is around the outside. Vignette. You can also do this with a couple of different techniques in Photo Raw. That's where you can edit your photos in the raw, where it has a vignette setting where you can move the dial and it puts more or less. But this is a way to do it right in Photoshop. So kind of like it. It kind of gives it a kind of a out of the way kind of look. It's a bit of a dark photo, but not bad. I mean, we could always take and do another edit here. We can always do another adjustment and do a curves and maybe do like a lighter, maybe not. How about contrast? Let's do medium contrast. What did it do? Okay, so this kind of works, but it's way too intense for my liking, so I'm going to back off the curves adjustment to where I'm happy with the effect. So maybe you might bring it in there. So as you can see, it almost seems like we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, not a lot of light, and it gives you a kind of a sense of seclusion, and it's I think it's nice. So you can always disagree with me. That's the whole point of the artistic eye. I might find something more fascinating than you might find something fascinating. So get out there and experiment, and if you're experimenting on Photoshop, it can be very rewarding. You can just sit here and play for hours upon hours, and get totally different effects each time. So let's file save this guy. So file save as, and we're going to go to a JPEG because that's what we're working in, and the new save. Yes, okay. All right, going back to original image. So here's our original image. It's kind of contrasty, but fairly dull on the colors, fairly dull on, the water's gray, it just kind of doesn't look too good. I don't like the way the water looks. I don't like the way the leaves look, The contrast is a little low. The brightness is a little low. So let's see what we did with the edits. So we lightened the whole picture up. First off, you can see it when we went from here's the original, here's the new. So the picture lightened up, and then we made a little bit of a vignette feel so that the foliage around the falls was a little bit darker. It didn't lighten up so much. That way it kind of kept it all in one piece, kind of framing the photo. And that's kind of the effect that we were looking for. So here we have it. Here's the original. 1, 2, 3, and here's now the new. A lot more contrast. Also a little boost to the color. You can see the greens are kicking out. You can see there's some different colored greens and some reds and blues in the falls itself that are kind of popping out now. It makes it look very nice, I think. Anyway. So that's been this week's Digital Babble with me, Flipper. And we talked about manual mode. We talked about bulb mode and the benefits of both. We also talked about light modifiers, how to get different lighting effects by using light modifiers such as shade, by using a hat or whatever you want to use. You can also use a diffuser light modifier where the light can be seen through it, and it kind of makes it a nice, soft, gentle, big light. So there's definitely a lot of different things you can do there. As well as we talked about some of the edits in Photoshop that you can do to nature, such as painting with light and maybe using some vignette to frame the photo a little bit. Also making some really interesting photo edits just by painting a little here, painting a little there, and being like, hey, all right, a little up here, a little bit down there, all right. And so that's this week's show. Please check out our website. You go to our website, tdbny.com. You can go check out Jakey's Corner. Jakey's been using my computer and typing away. If you don't know who Jakey is, Jakey's my cat. He's definitely a good typist all of a sudden. I don't know how he got so good. I caught him at the computer the other day, and he's been typing some articles. So he'll be publishing more articles out there. I'll be doing some how-to articles. I'll be giving some examples. I'm hoping to work with a lot of different people. If you got questions, if you want to send in questions, you want to send in comments or whatever, you can contact me, thedigitalbabble at gmail.com. Again, that's thedigitalbabble at gmail.com. And as always, you can check us out every Wednesday night live here at 7 p.m. right here on fingerlakes1.tv. And if you can't catch us on fingerlakes1.tv, you can always go check out the website, tdbny.com, and go check out any of the pre-recorded shows or any of the shows that I've done. They're recorded, they're out there, and you can go out there and also see the writing. So, and I'm Flipper, and I'm on every Wednesday, 7 p.m. here on the Babble, here on Finger Lakes 1. I will see you on the flip side.
A Flipside studio production. It's the Digital Babble. Tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on fingerlakes1.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter.